Hey everybody, it's time to talk about trimming hydrangeas. Now I'm going to talk about the Paniculata, Macrophylla, Arborescent, Serrata, and Corsifolia. Now those are all big words. Don't worry, I'm going to go into more detail about which varieties fall into each category, so don't worry. And I've gotten some feedback online from people saying, you trim your hydrangeas in the fall? Are you crazy? You should only do it in the spring. Well, that is not true. We have been trimming, especially our Paniculata and our Arborescents in the fall for decades, and ours look fantastic. They do great. And part of it has to do with our climate. So one is that we have a bigger window in the fall for trimming hydrangeas than we do in the spring, because usually in the springtime, the time from when the snow really melts to when they start to leaf out is actually very, very narrow in most years. So, whoa, we got some wind going on. And then in the fall, meanwhile, we start getting our first frost in late September, early October. So those plants are starting to go dormant quite early, and we still have a lot of good weather all the way into November. So that gives us oftentimes a good month or two to be able to do that trimming that we want to do on those hydrangeas. So I'm just going to stand by the fact that we do our trimming in the fall. You can save it for the spring. The most important thing is that you look at when they're dormant. That's the best time to really do a good trim on your hydrangeas. I better move because this wind is getting crazy. Hopefully it's a little calmer down here. Holy smokes. Anyway, the other reason it has to do with our snowfall. We are in a high snowfall area. So I live in the Upper Peninsula in a region that gets over 150 inches of snow on average. And I've been here when we've gotten over 300 inches of snow. And down where Nettis is in Posen, they tend to get over 85 inches of snow on average. So when you kind of combine that snowfall actually can kind of wreak havoc on some mature hydrangeas, because depending on when the snow comes and kind of the condition of the snow, that weight of the snow can oftentimes break branches. And I'm going to show you exactly what happened, because we had a really early snowfall this year before hydrangeas were trimmed. Let me show you what happened to our next door neighbor's hydrangea. So our neighbor has one of the most beautiful old-fashioned PG hydrangeas. This is going to be the ancestor to some of the modern hydrangeas like the Limelight that we have. Now it doesn't tend to blush quite as much. It gets just a little bit of pink, but it is covered in flowers. The flower heads are nice and large as well. And we just absolutely love this plant. It actually normally grows over our garage, but last week we had over a foot of snow. It was very wet and heavy, and there was a loss. So this branch came down, and we were trying to knock the snow off of it for him just to protect him. But you can see there's still remnants of the snow here, and you can see how many of the branches and blossoms got knocked off just from the weight of the snow. And right over there, that is the branch right there. It was huge, and just that extra weight just did it in. So for that reason, that's another reason why we would trim our hydrangeas in the fall, just to protect those branches. Now your younger hydrangeas are going to have more flexible stems, so they'll be less prone to breaking, however they still can. And then older hydrangeas are going to have more of those woody stems, and those are going to be more apt to break if they get a lot of snow and a lot of weight on them. So something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to start giving you some of the examples of the hydrangeas that I trimmed about, it was over a week ago when I trimmed these before the big snowstorm. So here we go. Let's start with the Paniculata varieties, which are notable for their panicle or cone-shaped flower heads. They start out white or lime, and then they blush to pink or mauve or parchment. Now these are more shrub-like plants, so if you look down at the base, there's usually a single stem with more woody branches. If you have a tree-form hydrangea, also called a standard or on-standard, those are also part of the panicle family, and those should be trimmed with the other Paniculata hydrangeas. The best known varieties are the Limelight and the Vanilla Strawberry, but there are a lot of other varieties. And there's also some varieties that have more lace cap flowers, like the Quickfire and the Pinky Winky. Those may resemble some of the other types of hydrangeas, so just wanted to tell you that. So if you have one of those, just be aware that it might not look exactly like all your other panicle varieties. All your panicle varieties do benefit from some trimming, usually by about a third, and it's best to do that in the fall or in the spring while the plant is still dormant. However, they can handle trimming at just about any time of year, but again, better when they're dormant. Before you start cutting, do look for the leaf nodes. Now, the leaf nodes are the bulges along the branches where leaves or new growth can appear. And now it's best to leave 2 leaf nodes along whatever branch you're trimming whenever possible, and cut above the leaf nodes, not across them. So you just go a little bit above and cut across them, because you cut across them, then nothing new can grow there. And panicle hydrangeas are very cold hardy, and they can recover from heavy pruning. So when we're trimming large amounts, we just go out there with a hedge trimmer and just give them a nice little shape. We kind of dome them, and they come back really great in the spring. On another note, if you wish to keep your hydrangeas shorter than the plant's natural height, pruning is not considered the best way to tame them. So you can kind of keep them a little shorter by heavy pruning every year, but if you definitely need a shorter hydrangea, it's better to replace it with one of the dwarf varieties. So there's like the Bobo, the Firelight Tidbit, the Little Quickfire, all those naturally stay smaller. You're gonna have a healthier plant and nicer looking plant if you stay with a dwarf variety. So you can see the hedger did miss some of the panicles, and then also I'm going to be on the lookout for some of these horizontal growing ones. I really don't want those in the mix, so I'm going to trim those a little closer. I'm also seeing spots where you can see these leaf nodes here, and then I have this stick sticking up, so I might catch those as well. Those aren't as important, but I'm going to just do a quick cleanup on these just to make sure that I catch all that stuff. Here's another one that I really don't want this one growing outward like that. So if I trim that one right there, I got 2 leaf sets, that should be fine. I'm kind of looking, looks pretty good from there. Over here, you can see this somewhat deformed one. I'm just gonna cut that right off. I don't wanna have to worry about that. This one too, growing really the wrong direction. I want them to be growing more vase-like and upwards. So I'm gonna trim those, but for the most part, the hedger did a pretty good job. You can see over here, I have another one going kind of the wrong direction. Make that go away. Just doing some quick little trims. Some of the ones on the outside, I'm gonna do a little bit more of a trim. I'm also gonna keep an eye on the skirt of the plant, making sure that there aren't any really low ones. Like here's a really low one. That one actually I'm gonna keep, but I'm gonna trim it back pretty far. Here's another one that got missed. We'll trim it back over here. Here's another one here. So that's gonna be just fine. Nothing too exciting there. Now the Bobos and the Quickfire Fabs, those were really floriferous this year, and so they have flowers right down to the skirt. I'm just gonna clean some of those up. I'm not too worried about that one because it just is a really good branching variety with lots of flowers. So let me get some of those. Let's see, we'll get some of these off the skirt as well, just to tidy that up. You can see kind of a mix of things going on here. Now, arborescent varieties are the large ball-shaped or domed flower heads with relatively small petals but big flower heads. The flowers are usually white, but there are many pink blooms on the market, and the flowers will usually fade to jade green in the late summer. And if you look down at ground level, the plants generally grow in kind of clusters of stems instead of a single branch, so it's a little easier to spot those. And the most popular are the Annabelle, Invincible, and Incredible varieties. Now, these can be trimmed to the ground every year. However, some gardeners do prefer to leave 6 to 12 inches on the stems. We usually do leave 3 to 6 inches just above the ground. A hedger is not required, but it will make quick work of trimming arborescent varieties, but you can always use your pruning shears as well. So, whatever works, but it will be very fast if you use a hedge trimmer. Paniculata and Arborescent varieties are the only hydrangeas that really require annual pruning. The other varieties I'm going to talk about really don't. So let me talk a little bit about those varieties. So there's Macrophylla, or big leaf hydrangeas. Those are the ones that can change from blue or purple to pink or kind of almost a red color, depending on the pH of the soil. However, there are some white varieties out there as well. Macrophyllas are known for their large mop head flower heads, and they usually have large petals. And the leaves on this kind of hydrangea are going to be a little bit more thicker and spongier than some of the other ones, and they're usually a nice dark green. They're sometimes hard to tell the difference between the different types just by on the leaf, but macrophyllas usually are notably different if you're looking at them across the lineup. The most popular are the Endless Summer and the Let's Dance series. Depending on the type and the age of the plant, for these, simply trim off the spent flowers throughout the season and remove any dead branches after the plant leaves out in the spring. Because these varieties can often flower on old and new growth, pruning the branches in the fall or spring could mean you're removing future flower buds. So only do them when they're leafed out and after the flower heads are done. That way you're not risking cutting off buds. It's also important to review the hardiness zones for your Macrophylla hydrangeas. There are several types in the box stores and flower shops that are simply sold as annuals in our area. Even if the tag says hardy, that often means it can make it through a freeze, but not through the well below zero temps that we face here in northern Michigan. So you want to look more at those zone 4 and 5 varieties. Even the 5s can be a bit temperamental by us. So just want to make sure you know that. Now, trimming is similar for these other types that I'm going to mention. There's the Corsifolia, that's also the oak leaf hydrangea, has large oak-shaped leaves that are known for their fall color. Then there's the Serrata or mountain hydrangeas. A popular variety is the Tough Stuff series. And then the Petiolaris or climbing hydrangea. Now, all of these only require deadheading, and you don't need to prune them except for removing misshapen or dead branches because you want to avoid cutting off those flower buds. You're going to treat those just like you would your Macrophylla. So let's recap. You've got Paniculata. Those are the cone-shaped flowers that start out white and blush to pink. You trim those by 1/3. Arborescents, those are the ball-shaped flowers. Usually they're white, but they can come in pink. Those we trim to about 6 inches, although you can trim them shorter or leave them a little taller if you prefer. Those are the only 2 varieties that you really should prune while they're dormant, either now in the fall or in early spring. Meanwhile, the other varieties, Macrophylla, Corsifolia, Serrata, Petiolaris, those you just deadhead the spent blooms and trim off any dead branches or misshapen branches.